Hello, welcome to Gardener's World. And welcome to Gardener's World Live here at the NEC in Birmingham. Now, Frances, it's summer, but you would barely know it because it is freezing.
It's a really cold wind, isn't it?
And whatever the weather, the plants here at the show are looking fabulous.
They really are. And there are lots of new things this year at the show. There's the urban gardening area for inspiration people with town or city gardens. And the International Orchid Show has made Gardener's World Live its home with over 20 exhibitors from all around the world. So that's kind of a show within a show.
The floral marquee here at Gardener's World Live is always a complete joy. There is an incredible range of plants. It's partly to do with the time of year. It's sort of the perfect point where you get the best mix of plants. You can go shopping, of course, so you can buy to your heart's content and get inspiration. And in talking of inspiration, the show gardens are full of ideas. And this year, of course, featuring a show garden by Adam. So, can't wait to see that. And come along if you can. And if you can't get here, sit back and share it with us for the next time.
Coming up on today's show, Carol selects some of her top plants for early summer colour.
Talk about the wow factor. They've used every single colour of the rainbow.
Nick and Sue get ideas for creating a big impact in a small plot.
And before we reveal his garden, Adam will be looking at ways to maximise planting in towns and cities.
Where are your bins? What do they look like? Do they look as good as that? Great idea.
I do love how accessible Gardener's World Live is. I mean, you can get here for a start, with or without a car. But once you do get here, you know, there's over 30 borders and showcase gardens alone, and they're dotted all over the place. There's so much inspiration.
And it is extraordinary how that even though some of the gardens are quite small, how many ideas, how many plant combinations and innovations you can cram into them. And Nick and Sue have been round the show, taking a look and finding that inspiration.
You know, I always think designing in small spaces presents, I guess, a unique set of challenges. You want to be able to pack in plants to give you year-round interest. You need to have the kind of scale that works in the space. It's quite a challenge, isn't it?
Well, I did a border last year and it was a real steep learning curve, yeah.
This garden is so clearly focused on wildlife, and the designers really thought about supporting a whole different set of pollinators. I mean, the Achille over there is perfect for parasitoid wasps, which will manage your aphids. There's the larger flowers, which suit the bumblebees. There's the little daisies down here, which are great for hoverflies. And then even the Salvia amistad over there. Really long corolla, but you often see little holes at the top. You know, that's when the pollinator can't get in that way, so they go in the top.
Oh, that's why it is. I love the ornamental millet with its bottle brush head, which will produce seed and feed the birds. So this area is all about feeding, and at the back is all about habitat. They've got a dead hedge and they've repurposed wood, and they've even drilled holes in the wood for the bees to overwinter.
Sue, would you like a fact of the day?
I would.
On average, approximately, people move house 8 times in their life.
You've moved a few times.
Yeah, a few more than that, 27 times.
27,
Yeah.
That's a lot.
But I've always been able to take kind of elements of the garden with me, and that's exactly what this renter's garden is about. It's apparently kind of plunged pots into the ground, pots on the surface. I have to say, I really love about it is the colour palettes. They're kind of beautiful mix of peaches and pinks, but then that bronze that runs all the way through, and the sort of see-through quality. So you've got the fennels and the brizzers and the like. I think it's a beautiful palette.
It is, and you invest in your plants. It's expensive, so you want to take them with you, don't you? But what I also love is they've spaced the plants, which does save you money because you don't need so many plants. But it also gives someone like me the easy access without damaging the plants, and it gives the plants space to, you know, really show off. And they've got things like an utalon, which isn't fully hardy, and you can just lift it inside and protect it.
So I guess it's all about creating a portable garden that you can move in and out of the house and in and out of different houses.
Flexible and accessible. I love this garden. This garden is all about repurposing and recycling and attracting pollinators. It's a small space, but lots of great ideas. And I particularly like this one, using prunings to create a habitat. But they're all very exact, and this is the sort of job I find really therapeutic. That may sound a bit nerdy. And then over there, there's a broken terracotta pot. Normally, I bash that up and use it as crocks, but here the designers used it as a hedgehog house, so I'm definitely going to nick that idea.
What I love is this little plant through here. This is San Vitalia, do you know it?
No, I've never seen it. It's really
Well, it's never sort of come to fame, but it's a brilliant little annual, which is just perfect as an edging plant or a container plant. Beautiful yellow flowers, makes a little domed kind of structure.
The designer has literally taken that library box from her front door. This is called the Little Library, this garden. Her house is in her front garden, and it's used for the community, again, to repurpose and recycle books. And it's a talking point. It brings people together, and they talk about books, and they talk about gardening.
So it's a real mix. It's community, it's all about pollinators, and it's a real pop of colour.
It is. What's not to love?
Indeed.
What do you think about when you're deciding what to put into your garden? It's lovely to have a mass of plants and just to bung them in. But if you want to create a really personal, creative, artistic picture, then there are three major considerations that you need to have. There's texture, there's colour, and then there's form. Now on this beautiful stand, there are all the usual spikes. There are lupins, there are foxgloves, but there are also a wealth of other plants too, which have this same sort of form. There are things like this agastache, absolutely delightful plant, scented flowers, scented foliage, and beyond it, a deep purple salvia, again, the same kind of flower spikes. This is one of the most interesting stands in the whole marquee. Apart from this dactylorhiza, one of our native orchids, there's not a spire or a spike in sight anywhere. And that interest is totally derived from texture. Just look at this asperula. Dainty, tiny little flowers making this absolute froth. During the winter it dies right down, but in the spring up it'll come and it'll surround other plants. But it doesn't fight or bully them, it just flatters everything. And in complete contrast, there's this little helichrysum here. So it's an everlasting flower. It's got these dry, crispy flowers. But what it's got underneath is these gorgeous, crunchy little rosettes. Beautiful texture right the way through. But it doesn't like winter wet. So give it a bit of protection, perhaps from a wall behind it. All the plants on this whole stand, they're full of texture. Of course, the other thing that we all need in our gardens is colour. Now, in this section of this garden, they've really gone to town. Talk about the wow factor. They've used every single colour of the rainbow, bright red dahlias, lovely purples and oranges, the whole kaleidoscope. But over here, things are a little bit different. Here, the colour is subtle. It's soft and gentle. Everything merges into the next thing. There are no sharp shocks here at all. This side of the stand really does combine all those qualities we're talking about. Colour, yes. Form, look at those foxgloves, but you've also got texture. Just feel that. It's so soft, so beautiful.
When I look at all these gardens, I see not just the beautiful designs, but also the months of hard work and planning that's gone into creating all of these. I built my first ever show garden 2 years ago here, and so I know from experience how much effort and time and emotional investment goes into building a show garden. As does Adam. He'll be feeling all of that this year because he's designed the headline garden here at the show. Back in April, Adam unveiled his design. The plan was to create a garden combining ornamentals with edibles, centred around an outdoor cooking area, to create a space that was a real celebration of homegrown food. The next step was to pick the plants.
I've just driven 200 miles to catch up with my old mate, John Wheatley. I've known him longer than I'd even like to admit, and I've never managed to get down here to have a look at his setup. But he can be a little elusive at times, so I'm just hoping he's actually here. John Wheatley has won multiple gold medals for his own garden designs over the years. And when it comes to growing fruit and veg, he is one of the best in the business. John?
Oh, hello.
I'll tell you what, boy. It's me thinking I've driven 200 miles and you're not even going to be here. What have you got for me, mate?
Well, we've got a lovely range of plants. Got some nasturtiums, for example. I think they were on your list, if I can find your list.
Do you know, the bit that I'm most looking forward to today is finding out what you actually are growing for me, because
Well,
I've sent you a list, but I know you're not going to...
it's largely in line with the list.
Of course it is.
But you know, with your experience with show gardens, you can never tell what's going to be the best, and we want to give you the best stuff we can.
No, bless you.
Even though it's you.
Yeah, exactly.
It's a new chart.
Yeah.
Beetroot, lettuce,
Wow.
and for April, that's not bad, is it?
No, look at that. Superb.
In here, we've got some tomatoes for you, Adam. Not all of them are yours.
What do you mean not all of them are mine?
Interesting ones.
Eh? What about the lovage, mate?
You can have some lovage. I got some lovely lovage.
The amount you have to grow to get that one near perfect plant, the timings have to be so tight, don't they? Because reality is, these could all of a sudden go over in a week, couldn't they, you know?
Easily. This project has set the bar quite high.
That's looking good, mate, isn't it? The wasabi.
Yeah, it loves the shade and loves its
Yeah.
feet in water.
So I've got a stream that's moving through the garden, through the orchard, and it will be, in theory, semi-shade, so that's going to love it. I mean, you've just got that stood in water, haven't you?
Yeah, yeah. And just keep the pests off it, but
Yeah.
if you keep it in water, the slugs don't go through the water.
like, yeah, which is a good tip, mate. Yeah, that's looking cracking. Been really lovely just to come down and see John. But the moment you see the plants, all of a sudden, it feels real, and my head is just spinning. Well, that could go with that, and that could go with that. And in reality, I just want to get there now and get on with it. Look at those beauties. So, I'm here at Gardeners World Live. We've got 6 days to go until the show opens. The herbaceous plants and the veggies are here, so it's the exciting bit. But also, this has been like going down memory lane. It was the early 90s when I first started building gardens here. I know I don't look that old. But look, trees are in, shrubs are in, and it's starting to look like a garden. Think back about that design, all right? So it was the end of the chef's garden. This is the kitchen here behind me. There you've got all your little woodland walkway coming through. So this is a little terrace area. Then you've got to be interplanted with your veggies through there. Bridge comes down, stream comes all the way through. Even without the herbaceous and the veg in, it's starting to feel something, which is great. I was having a walk around the garden the other night before I left and thought, well, that pot of hostas look good. Oh yeah, I need a water lily for the water feature. And all of a sudden I'm emptying my own garden to bring it to the show. It will all go home again. You can take that back. I don't always like planting in straight rows, so interplanting your herbs and your veggies with your herbaceous, the garden starts to feel different, and that's what this is about. You know, as much as how it looks, it's about how it feels. I was a little bit worried about my grass, to be honest, but my mates just said either give it a feed or give him a call. We've got like 5 or 6 days, so once we sort of tease through, everything should be fine. But that's some of the problem with things like this. You know, they travel a long way. You have them before the show because you want to get them in, but then sometimes things can get a little bit shocked, you know, so they don't like moving at a certain size. But that's the whole fun of show gardens. So we're just putting in the wasabi in here next to the stream. John had it growing, you might remember, in those trays of water, so it is a plant that loves those moist conditions, slightly shady, and away it goes. And interestingly, the slugs really love wasabi, and they've not touched this. Eh? Well done, John. It's me scratching my chin. I think there's going to be plenty of that going on. That's the main view. So it's really important just to get that absolutely spot on. But we'll get there. And hopefully when you see it later, you'll like it.
Now, have you noticed, Frances, it's been just a little bit wet recently?
I have, you know.
I mean, it really is climate change happening, isn't it? I mean, this garden is all about kind of dealing with water and changes that are happening in the environment. And actually, this structure over us is brilliantly designed. So it captures rainwater, it redirects it down into this reservoir. And I think what's clever about the design here is it both acts as a pool to hold water long term for the plants, but it's also a sneaky plunge pool as well.
I really like the use of water storage being a feature, you know, rather than just being a water butt in the corner that you don't necessarily like the look of. Here it's an actual pond with watermint and other marginal plants within it, and also where we can sit. And all these lower beds here are actually wicking beds, so they have a reservoir of water deep within the soil, and it sort of holds on to water so that plants can access it whenever they need. So we all need to be thinking of ways of storing water and building that resilience.
And do you know what? I've spotted another garden with, I think, some brilliant water ideas. Should we have a look? This is it, and I think it is a really brilliant amalgamation of different ideas. It's got water at its heart, but the design of it is beautifully done. And actually, it's really kind of considerate around wildlife and how you can support that in your garden. So this pond, it's roughly 1 metre by 1 metre. There's a beautiful reflection of the landscape around it. It's got the lily pads in there, so it supports wildlife. Yep. Snails will lay their eggs on the back, the water snails. And then what I love to see, and you always get this with lily pads, is that bumblebees and honeybees will land on there and they can drink from the edge. So it's just perfect.
It's magical when you see that, isn't it? I really like this rill. So I'm guessing that this would be where the house would be. Drain water would come down the downpipe and land in here, and then the water goes straight from here into a hole. This would be, I guess, like a bog garden, and you've got eupatorium, you've got veronicastrum that will enjoy those wet conditions, and the centre of the garden would be the wettest place, which then gets drier as it goes out. And the fact that they've used all of this permeable paving and mulch, essentially, means that you're having plants not sitting in too much water, because this would get quite wet in a real setting. It just shows that people are thinking about the ways that we can save water, use water, and really integrate water into the design of our gardens. I think it's just really good.
Yeah, and at the same time, you can create a beautiful garden while considering all of those things.
Yeah, absolutely.
I've got a Jim.
Nice.
And a Region, is that how you pronounce it?
Region, yeah.
And a Ranunculus.
Verantis, yeah,
Is
or
that how you
buttercup.
pronounce it?
Yeah.
Oh, buttercup,
Do you know what?
yes.
Don't worry about how you pronounce it. Just all you want to do is make sure you can look after them. But I would say all in the sun. That one, those two want to be slightly damper than that one.
Okay, lovely.
There you go.
So I've got shade at the front, and then I've got an open sort of field at the back that floods.
Right.
So sometimes it's clay soil, sometimes it's full of water, sometimes it's dry.
The electrons love clay.
Yeah.
And so does your astrantia too.
So I've done well.
You've chosen
Done well,
brilliantly.
excellent.
That is amazing, by the way.
Thank you.
It's absolutely brilliant.
And then this palette is very pale.
It is, yeah.
I love your Acer.
They love a shady spot, they don't like the wind, they're a bit sensitive. They're like me.
Yeah, exactly. But I love this.
It's already injured me once. I actually leaned down and it got me in the eye.
Got her.
It got me on my eyelid.
We're not sure where that's going yet, but
I recommend it goes in a shady place.
Yes, you can start. Yeah.
We've got
Yeah,
a
that'll be a
south-facing garden with no shade, but we've just built a massive...
So you've got, so I love that. So you've got a south-facing garden.
We're creating
With-
shade so that we can have shady plants.
Oh, so you've created shade. I love that. There is a whole new area at this year's show that's totally dedicated to urban gardening, which I think will go down a tree, especially as we're only really a stone's throw from Birmingham city centre. It can be a little bit tricky to create an oasis of calm in our busy urban environments, but if you can get that little green space just right, it can become a massively important part of your everyday life. Materials are always important. That selection needs to sit well with the house. And then here, it's a clever use of levels because these raised beds could double up as seating. Make it a little bit wider, add a table in front. But also they're a really quick way of improving the soil. And then when you've got that all organised, then we start to think about whether we've got sun or whether we've got shade. And this demonstrates it really well. I think sometimes it can feel a little bit overwhelming when we're trying to design a border. This demonstrates really well how to put a border together. It's built in layers. So if we start up above, we've got the palms. Then we come down a layer, we've got eucalyptus and other shrubs. Remember, these will all deal with sunny, dry conditions. Then we come down again, and you've got the herbaceous plants and the grasses. Those grasses will give you great little movement, but then actually the shrubs will give you fantastic habitat. And up above, that will dapple the light and provide a little bit of privacy from next door. It's quite interesting. I'm now in the shady part of the garden. This over here instantly feels cooler and calmer. It's still put together with those layers, tree ferns, the fatsias, and then you've got the herbaceous perennials. But this relies a lot more on shapes, forms and finishes of leaves. Wonderful little contrasts going on. Think about colour and woodlands. They are cool, calm places. A lot of softer blues, whites. And that white, it can be really important in a shady spot because it just pings in the light and really draws your eye in. But there's something else that we can get from this little space. What about your boundaries? If you've got a small space, they're important. Your fences, maybe you have green walls, climbers. I think sometimes we forget our gardens also have to be practical places. Where are your bins? What do they look like? Do they look as good as that? Great idea. It's a bin store with a cedar roof on top. But thinking about those surfaces, can we green everything up? How you put your plants together, that hard landscaping, all those elements just right. You could be well on the way to having your own little urban paradise. Just down the road from here, in Birmingham's industrial heartland, is an area called Digbeth, where 66% of dwellings do not have a garden or outside space. But that does not stop them gardening. We went to visit a project that is using gardening to enhance the health and well-being of not just the community, but the city itself. And they've built a garden here at the show.
If you travel about 10 miles from Gardeners World Live, you'll arrive here at Digbeth in the city. So Digbeth is a bit rough around the edges, but it's got a lot of heart. It also has lots of potential. And much like the people that we work with, we know that out of that something magical can happen. I'm Jo Kappa. I'm project lead for the Growing Project, which is a community gardening scheme. We work with people who are vulnerable or experiencing crisis in the city. I guess for many of the communities that we work with, their access to green spaces is, really difficult. These spaces are really important. Not only do they provide an amazing space for the wildlife in the city, but they also enable the many communities that don't have good access to green spaces to connect to nature. The reason why we was drawn to this space along the canalways was because of the existing toxicity in the soil and realising that we can't just move soil somewhere else, we have to learn how to deal with it. Matt is the producer on the Growing Project.
So the border that we're doing for Gardeners World Live has been inspired by this stretch of canal side and the plants that are growing here. The soil here is laden with toxic heavy metals, the sort of scariest of which is lead, arsenic, cadmium, mercury, things that really you shouldn't touch. The reason that is that Digbeth used to be the centre of the Industrial Revolution, and a lot of the waste materials would have been dumped in the canal. A lot of the work we're doing is using plants to try and reduce toxicity and improve the quality of the soil. And that includes some of the really beautiful, obvious flowers, but also lots of the species that are maybe overlooked. And we want to try and, platform those species as well. Plants like the common nettle and also the buddleia. These are hyperaccumulator plants, which means that they draw up a lot of different things every year. They grow really fast. Nettles can be 3 foot in a season. And we want to know, whilst they're drawing up lots of stuff from the soil, are they also taking up these toxic elements into their stems? Are they storing them in their roots? This is Phacelia. This is one of the things we did introduce to the site. It's great for biodiversity, great for pollinators, as you can see. And we use it as sort of a ground cover, really. It grows well through the winter and it has a long flowering period as well. We're working with students from the University of Birmingham who are actually looking into what these plants are doing with certain elements. Because if we can use these plants to help solve these problems, then this could be a really cost-effective, low-labour way of making a real difference to inner-city industrial green spaces. Whilst we're here improving the soil, we're also noticing benefits with our Growing Project members as well. Many of the volunteers and people that work with us on the project may have experienced homelessness. We've been running regular sessions, not just in this garden, but in some hostel gardens as well, to try and encourage people into green spaces, to give people the means and the autonomy to look after those spaces themselves, and to be the people who are making the biggest change in the city as well.
We're at St Anne's, which is a hostel in Digbeth. This garden was set up in 2019 and it was a garden space that we used to bring people together, to heal together through nature.
We've got some red onions and we've got some herbs. These are sweet peas in this bed.
A lot of the people who come here have sort of really come through some sort of adversity or difficulty. We decide together what's going to be grown here, and then over the year they're really invested in ensuring that crop. Just being able to care for something else in the world when their own care for themselves might be in question, that's a real positive step for them.
Oh yeah, very nice. We're going to have a good crop this year, hopefully. If this rain stays off. Since Growing Project started, it's a nice place to be for the people in the hostel, especially in the summer, when the flowers are in full bloom. It's a thriving garden that St Anne's is proud of, and I'm happy,
So yeah, if you've got an open space like this where you can kind of just come and not be judged, for somebody to see past your flaws and look at the person underneath. It's just a bunch of human beings enjoying a garden, being human beings together.
Kieran is our lead gardener on this site. He started with the project back in 2019 where he was referred to us and he came to take part in the garden as a therapeutic activity.
This journey kind of started out of necessity for me. I'd basically given up. Thankfully, this being one part of it and the light bulb moment, the awakening, if you like, Just changed everything, and I've really just took to embracing it now. So understanding nature, and it kind of helps me understand myself a little bit better, I think. It's part of me now, kind of working in and amongst nature, in whatever form that takes, whether it's doing garden shows or working with hostels or down at the canal site.
This is the magic of the project. It's enabled him to go on and study horticulture at the Botanical Gardens here in Birmingham. This project has really enabled him to see it as a future career. Kieran and Matt worked on the design for Gardeners World Live that really reflects the planting and also the water of the canal.
These are sections of the garden design, so this will be sat inside the 3 metre by 3 metre raised bed. The idea of it is, once the show's finished, we can then bring these back and introduce them on the canal side. The gabions will be filled with all the old engineering bricks that were kind of falling down from the wall. Got really nice patination from the graffiti. Basically, these are like a deposit where you can get rid of all the stuff that would ordinarily go into a landfill or into a skip. Wanted to show the natural beauty that you find walking up and down the canal paths that ordinarily you might just walk past and not really notice. There's leucanthemum, which is the oxeye daisy, cow parsley, various types of plantains. You'll see that growing out of nooks and crannies everywhere. Weed is perception, isn't it? Anything can be a weed. So I think it's the idea of really taking a close look at what's actually there. So just because you don't particularly want it in your garden, or it might be taking up space that you don't particularly want, doesn't take any of the beauty away from it or the function of it. I think if you can change the idea of how something's perceived, you can change the value of it, which is kind of what I'd like to try and do with what we're doing here.
When we move the garden back from Gardeners World Live, not only will it do a great job for nature, but it will also mean the world to our vulnerable communities and their sense of achievement.
I found that absolutely fascinating, and what a powerful project. So, here it is. I think they've captured the project perfectly. Across the back there, look, you've got the gabions, even with the graffiti. The canal comes down through the middle. There's the old detritus of the past, things like china and bricks, oysters that would have come up the canal. But actually, in industrial times, they were then made into little buttons. And then look, modern day detritus, things like cones. And there's even a tiny little shopping trolley. And then it comes to the planting. And I think we look at plants, we see that beauty, we understand that they provide for wildlife. But I'm not sure we always pay enough attention to how hard that they work, whether it's locking down carbon or it's providing oxygen. Well, like with this project, sucking pollutants out of the ground to improve that soil. What a project. And it's got community at its heart.
I've been coming to Gardeners World Live for a long time, and I've noticed a real change, actually. It's not only is there more gardens, more things to see, but the range of things has increased. There's more diversity.
I mean, even as you walk by, architectural gardens, naturalistic gardens, I can see that, but and then also the borders, I suppose, lots of planting combinations.
Yeah, and I think it's more than that. I think it's a cultural change. There was a time, not so terribly long ago, when gardening was intimidating. It was something you had to learn. I think, thankfully, that has gone.
I think people still get intimidated by it, but hopefully when they come to places like this and chat to expert growers about plants and see all the different things, hopefully that helps to not feel intimidated.
Well, what I'd like to think is they come to a show like this and see, in the end, you're playing, you're making things up, it's creative.
Yes.
And it doesn't matter what other people think.
I agree.
Anyway, there is lots more to come on today's programme.
Sue seeks inspiration for her white border at home.
This is like a firework. It's wonderful.
Carol finds out what new plants are hot off the potting bench this year.
I just find this plant irresistible. It'll go on year after year after year.
Nick gives his tips for perfect patio planting.
And I love these kind of waved corten steel beds, really set off the palette of plants.
And we finally reveal the headline act, Adam's Show Garden. But first, I'm going to be visiting a garden that some of you had an important contribution to. This is the viewer's garden, designed by Pip Probert, and it represents your average plot. We've got vegetables, you've got wonderful flower beds, you've got a little bit of grass, you've got a wildlife area, all the elements of the ideal garden packed into a relatively small space. But more than that, there's another element too, and that is it incorporates specific features sent in over the last few years by viewers from their own gardens. This is a homemade greenhouse, and it was inspired by Martin and Carol Rayner from their garden in Essex. Martin and Carol used recycled shower doors, but Pip was unable to get those, but has taken the idea, taken the inspiration, and used recycled shower curtains. And I love the way that you can roll them down. You can get heat in winter, you can protect it from cold winds, but then you can open it out, and not only is that great for ventilation, but also it makes it a lovely working space. You can look out, it feels accessible. The whole thing is adaptable, it's flexible, and of course costs practically nothing. This potting shed takes its inspiration from a visit to Kelly Howarth's garden in Bury. And what Kelly showed us was that you can recycle and upcycle anything and everything, but it still can look stylish. This shows that with a little bit of care and a little bit of inspiration, you can make it look really good as well as being practical and cheap. Now this blue board with its ridges comes from Famie MacDonald. Now Famie was suggesting that we make these hedgehog ramps or ladders. Very easy to make yourself and incredibly good even though they're so simple. In this case it's running up into a nesting box, but it could go up some steps or up to a hole in a fence so the hedgehogs can move from garden to garden. So simple idea like that can make all the difference. And I have to say that just last night I saw a hedgehog at Longmeadow. The garden incorporates another idea from a viewer. This comes from Donna Harvey-Bailey in Staffordshire, and it is a fluff hanger. Now, a fluff hanger is a very ornately made container using twisted willow and prunings of any kind to contain fluff, which means that birds have material to make their nests. This garden incorporates lots of ingenious ideas, and if you've got something that you think might tickle our fancy, then we'd love to hear from you. Go to our website and you get all the details of how you can do that. For the very first time, the International Orchid Show is here at Gardeners World Live, and this will display orchids from all over the world, from as far afield as Thailand. Now, unfortunately, we didn't manage to get to Thailand to see orchids, but we did go to Essex to meet one of the country's top orchid growers.
We got quite a lot of plants in our garden. I don't know the numbers. Collecting plants is very addictive. I'm Zsuzsa. Welcome to our garden. We have plants everywhere. We started off collecting different garden plants, moving on to house plants, and then going into orchids. Here we go. This is our first greenhouse out of the 4. A little bit crowded, but we like it this way. I would say around 10,000 plants in the greenhouses. Orchids have definitely gone under my skin. I need to touch them, I need to feel them, I have to have them in my life. So orchids are very versatile. They can be grown in pots, they can be grown on mounds, they can be grown hanging or on the table or sometimes in the ground. They're very, very adaptable. My partner really likes the big blousy plants, which we are going to display at the Gardeners World Live. But I like the miniature ones and the more curious plants, so we are going to represent them on the display as well, like this Chirachista here. So this miniature here is so tiny. It's got so many flower spikes on, but you really, really need your glasses on to be able to see them. So this plant's called Xenorchis scolopendria, and it's a super miniature plant, comes from Thailand, and it only grows 2 leaves per year. And they're not for everyone because they're just so different. We bring in plants from all over the world now. Anywhere we find a very good source, you know, fair and legal, which is very important for us. So we bring in plants from Europe, from South America, from Asia, Taiwan, Thailand. Because the orchid world is so huge, you would never have all the species in your lifetime, ever. It's just not possible. Most of the orchids are epiphytic, which means they live up in the forest canopy in the trees. So no soil, no bark, nothing. They just literally cling on to the trees. So the plastic mount is really just to keep the plants on anything. The reason why it's plastic is because when we import plants, we can't import them on anything else other than plastic, because if it's a wood, we will have to have a special certificate for the wood as well. So it's much, much easier to grow them on a plastic mount. I like the plastic mounts because they've got lots of holes on them, so the roots can easily attach themselves to it. So this is a very good way of keeping them. Orchids are very easy to grow. They don't need much care, actually, which is completely the opposite of what people think. Don't be scared of orchids and try them, because they are really good fun and they deserve to be in people's houses. So apart from growing the unusual special plants, we also grow phalaenopsises. These are the most commonly grown orchids and the well-known orchids because they last longer. The flowers can last for about 2 to 8 months, anything in between. They don't need much attention. You can keep them in room temperature and just overall got a very good reputation. People always ask us, why do they come in clear pot? The plants are in clear pot for one reason only, is for the grower to see if the roots are well and healthy. But phalaenopsises don't particularly need the light for the root system. But we really like having all our orchids in clay pot. It's really helping us to understand how well established the plants are, how well they're doing in a pot. And some people cannot tell how wet the actual media is inside. By looking, it gives them an indication. The roots need to be either white or a nice silvery color. That means they are nice and dry. If it's a green color, that means it's a bit wet, so you have to wait for them to dry out. If they got brown coloring, that means it's not healthy and not happy. People start off from getting the first orchid from the supermarket or a garden center, and then they get another one, and they get on really well. They start collecting more interesting ones. It's dangerous. So this particular plant is one of my favorites. It's called Dracula, or otherwise known in English monkey face orchid, because when you look at it, it looks exactly like a monkey staring at you. It hasn't bloomed for years, actually, so this is a very good moment. They are very cool growing orchids, come from a cloud forest from South America, and therefore when we take them to shows, they don't actually behave very well because they're very temperamental. If it's too hot in the showground, they just start wilting and then we can't display them. They don't flower for a long period of time, so we are very hoping that one of these guys will be just in the stage to be able to show to people. But it will all depend on the day. Fingers crossed we can take them, yes.
Giselle, you've made it to the show, but the big question is, has your blood-sucking orchid made it?
It hasn't made it, unfortunately.
Okay, but it's a glorious display, and orchids are such a vast family. There's, what, 20-odd thousand species. I've been photographing the native ones near me in the last few weeks, but you've got such a range here. Are there any particular highlights for you?
We got so many different ones. This one, for example, which is a Bulbophyllum nymphopolitanum, is very special for one reason, is the smell of it. So would you like to try it?
Okay. It smells like rotted meat, right?
Yes, it does, yes, yes. In the nature, they're pollinated by flies, so this is a good way of luring in the flies.
I can smell something really nice on the stand as well, something kind of quite sweet.
Yeah, we got something nice and sweet for everybody. So this one is a tiny bit of Porogrosso.
Oh, beautiful. Oh, wow. Well, that's a delight in comparison. It's almost like a carnation or a dianthus smell.
Yes. Yeah, very
really
nice,
sweet and sugary, and
yes.
Oh, that's really, really good. Now, I have to say, I sort of felt like I knew a fair amount about orchids, but never seen anything like this.
So that one is a Mazavalia, and that one is just unusual because it has different petals, very rare and very sought after.
Wow. Well, your stand looks fabulous. It's so great to see orchids done so well. So, congratulations.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
I'm looking for some inspiration for my white border at home. Lots of different textures and heights. And this lovely geranium, Sanguinium album, has caught my eye. And that likes a bit of shade, which is ideal for me. That lovely little salvia will be an ideal filler, and that likes the sun. So this has given me lots of ideas. I'm going to go and hunt for some more. Hello, Steph.
Hi.
What lovely, lovely Philadelphias you've got here. I can smell them, they're delicious. There's some different varieties here. What have you got?
Yes, Sue, we've got 3 different varieties here. We've got Snowbells, which is very white and double flowered. Belle Étoile, which has a very slight pink centre, and also Coronarius, which is slightly whiter but single flowered.
And are there any difference in height?
The Snowbells is a slightly smaller one, so that will maybe get to about 2 metres. Most of them will grow to around 3 to 4 metres, but don't be put off because they actually love to be pruned. So the best thing to do is prune it after it's flowered, so when the plant is fully grown, it's at this height.
At this height, yeah. I've left mine grow, so that's a really good bit of advice. So I particularly like this one and the scent of it. It's known as mock orange, isn't it?
Yes. The flowers actually resemble the orange flower, but the scent is of gorgeous sort of orange, jasmine, that kind of note.
That's what it is, it's jasmine, but it also reminds me of clean linen.
Absolutely.
This is like a firework, it's wonderful. It'll be just right for the lower levels in my border because it only grows to about 50 centimetres high. But it's quite wide, and if I'm planting them, I need to plant them about 30 centimetres apart. They'd be great if I left the seed heads on through the winter for wildlife, or as dry cut seed heads, they look really good in the house. There's one more flower that's caught my eye. And it's this. It's a white rose campion, and it's perfect. The silver leaves are really a lovely colour. Hopefully they'll self-seed everywhere. So with all the white plants I've seen today, I've got enough to boost my borders to the full.
Every year, visitors to the show rush to this stand to see what's new. It's hot off the potting bench. And this is a sort of showcase to show you all these brand new introductions. Now, lots of gardeners haven't even got a garden, but they still grow their plants in pots and containers. Well, this is a plant for you. Do you yearn for one of those great big buzzlias full of butterflies, but you've got no room? This is the answer. It's the teeniest buzzard you ever did see. It's called Summer Bird, and it's got the most delightful deep purple flowers. And if you look at these tips, every single one is loaded with buds. So it's going to flower all summer long. One of the best ways of making sure that you utilise all your space is to go up in the world. And these are the plants for you. It's a Thunbergia alata. There are two of them here. This one's called, very imaginatively, orange and red. And this one's called tiger eye. They're both annuals. Now, left to its own devices, the plant will produce loads and loads of these growing tips, just trying to expand in every direction. But if you get in there and nip them out, right down here above a leaf node where the leaf joins the stem, that means you'll help the plant to make more and more flowers. And that, after all, is the whole point. This really is a wonderful new introduction. I just find this plant irresistible. It's an argyranthemum. It's called Grand Daisy Big Pink. It's a tender perennial, which means you've got to shelter it during the winter, but it'll go on year after year after year. And if you look into the centre of any of these flowers, you can see, just like any other daisy, there's going to be absolutely masses of pollen. So you're going to get all those bees and hoverflies flying in. Just nip those flowers back when they've finished and it will go on giving its beauty all summer long.
There's some great landscaping on display in the show gardens here, all softened by brilliant planting schemes. These two gardens are absolutely identical in their layout, but they're for different environments, so loads of different take-home ideas. This is all about hot and dry, and the other side is all about damp and shady. Now this has got a beautiful palette, the way this all hangs together. Nearly all the plants in here have a sort of silver coating to them, and so many sun-loving plants have that to protect them from sunburn. And this agave has got exactly that sun-protected bloom across its surface, which gives it that blue-grey note. And you can see the shadow of previous leaves. Now it comes from Mexico and it's surprisingly hardy. It will cope with a few degrees below as long as it's got good free-draining soil underneath it. This Heliotolithium, or sedum as we all know it, it really adds something interesting to the palette. It's a succulent, it's great for those kind of hot, dry conditions, but by adding those kind of pink and purple notes, it just kind of elevates all the silvers around it. And then down here, I absolutely love this little osteospermum. It comes from South Africa and it will flower for a good 6 months. It absolutely loves to be baked in the sunshine, and it's a composite flower, so there's masses of little blooms packed into the centre, which makes it perfect for pollinators. As you can see, the palette here is very different. So it's suited to a north-facing garden that's perhaps damp and quite shady. And I think there's often perception that those gardens are just going to be green and a little bit dank. But actually, with the right palette of plants, you can have fabulous colour. So these candelabra primulas through the front here in yellow and pink really add some vibrancy. And then this primula vialii is absolutely spectacular. And I particularly love the planting down here. The designer's been so clever with this pairing. There's Gelena here, which is a little woodlander, very happy in the shade, and has that real vibrant, sparkly white. But that's picked up by the edge of the hosta leaf. So they have that lovely relationship between the two. Just create that wonderful, lush atmosphere. In spite of the weather, this garden feels distinctly summer-like. It whisks you over to the Mediterranean. Now, the hard landscaping is a lot softer here, and I love these kind of waved corten steel beds. Really set off the palette of plants. This is a really star plant for me. It's Tolbagia violacea, and it comes from South Africa. It's part of the Allium family, and it flowers for about 6 months, so it's brilliant in borders and even better in pots. Now, sticking with that Mediterranean, slightly coastal theme through the garden is this, which is Limonium. Now, it's actually a coastal plant and it does really well in kind of gravel-like settings like this. It barely needs any water to grow. The flowers last for months, and what's more is you can cut them. They're already dried and they'll last for years. And the plant for me that really embodies that Mediterranean vibe are these cypresses or pencil pines. It just whisks you straight to Tuscany. Now there's a top tip: if you're growing these at home, it's seriously worth wiring them inside to hold some of those branches together, because in the long term they can ultimately splay. So this garden, like the other two we've looked at, uses very, very soft planting to counter the hard landscape and bring everything together as a whole. Now, after months of meticulous planning and tireless hard work, it's finally time to reveal Adam's show garden. And believe me, it's been worth the wait.
What a lovely place to be in. And here it is, the garden in its full glory, and it's stunning. Now, Adam's idea of this chef who's reclaiming wilderness and turning it into a garden has really worked beautifully, and this is the wilderness that's still left. It's lovely. The grass has picked up and the nut trees and the apple trees that run through this orchard are really stunning, especially with the beautiful spring edged with logs. I really like that, and I like that he's kept it, this imagined space of wild beauty. But then you come into a much more cultivated space than I was actually expecting to see. Clearly, this chef knows what he's doing. The shrubs that are underplanted with herbaceous perennials, but also interplanted with things like kale, chard, there's Korean mint, there's normal mint, there's all sorts of edibles in amongst this, and it's beautifully executed. It is a proper garden. But there's something over there that I really wasn't expecting to see. These picking paths are straight lines, and there are vegetables in straight lines as well, all planted in rows in this part of the garden, and I really wasn't expecting that. It's really nice though, because it gives this proper vegetable garden feel here, and then you move slightly more into garden spaces behind me, so it's a garden of many sections, and yet they all hang together really, really beautifully. Well, how has it been?
It's been an absolute joy, honestly.
Really?
Yeah.
Not stressful?
No.
I think it's amazing. I love the whole blend of edibles and ornamentals anyway, because edibles are ornamental.
But also, when you walked along my little path,
Yeah.
did you see a certain plant just tucked away there?
You can see it now.
Go on.
It's a Vietnamese coriander like I gave you all those years
Exactly.
ago.
So there we go. So that was for you.
I appreciate it. It's a beautiful plant though, don't you think?
And as you're planting it, you're shaking it and getting it in place. And I was...
The smell.
Yeah. So I'm going to re-engage. I'm going to give it a go.
Okay.
But probably just when I'm cooking less leaves.
That's it, I think. But you're the cook, you know. I'm not a very good cook and I've always overdone it, but I've come to that conclusion as well with the Vietnamese coriander.
Bless you. But no, it's been really lovely, and I just hope everybody turns up and enjoys it.
I'm sure they will. Have you actually sat down and relaxed and enjoyed it at all?
Not yet. I haven't, seriously, shall we?
Shall we do it?
Why not?
I'm afraid that's all we have time for from Gardeners World Live today.
But the show's open until Sundays, so if you can get down here, please do. There is loads to see.
What, you mean more than just you and your garden?
Exactly, yeah.
And next week I'll be at Powderham Castle in Devon, where I'm helping out in the walled kitchen garden there, and that's Friday at 8 o'clock. Until then though, we'll see you soon.
Bye-bye.
Lush landscapes, dramatic coastlines and plenty of crack. Irish island hopping with Ardal O'Hanlon. Discover the Emerald Isles on iPlayer. Press red now. Here on BBC Two, you never know what you might find under the floorboards of a stately home. Let's find out together. Hidden Treasures of the National Trust, next. you.